morning our hearts are all heavy with the unspeakable events of Friday in Newtown, Connecticut. Many of my colleagues have chosen to put aside what they had planned to say today to address this thing which weighs on us so. After a lot of wrestling, I've decided to go ahead with what I plan to say and see if it could shed some light on what we are all experiencing. For what I had planned to speak of is light. Last week, the Beacon Youth Outreach, 12 fresh young faces, danced and sang in this space about December nights and December lights. It brightened everyone's spirit that was here. I had the privilege yesterday to watch some of them do a repeat performance in the village market across the street, right in front of the meat counter. And now, right now as I speak, they're doing another repeat performance at Stop and Shop in Orleans. If anyone is going that way after church, stop and see them. They will be performing until 1. They will take whatever extra money that you might have in your wallet after the holiday fair. Light is such a fitting symbol of the Spirit. It is incorporeal. You can't grab it or lift it, and yet it is indispensable. For those of us with working eyesight, most of what we know about the world comes through light. In the early 20th century, scientists discovered an amazing thing about light. When you break it down into its simplest elements, it is both a wave and a particle. We've all heard this so much that we don't often stop to think about what it means. A particle is something solid, like a rock you can hold in your hands. You can feel your rock. It has weight. It has a certain size. It has inertia. You can feel it start and stop as you heft it. You can put it in your pocket and take it out again. If you take your rock down to the shore of the lake, you can throw it in. Then, as it enters the water, the rock will make waves. Each of the waves is a shape that the impact of the rock has generated in the water. The wave is not the water. The wave is a disturbance in the water. It is not a thing at all in the sense that the rock is, or the water itself is. The wave is a characteristic of the water. Yet when we say that light is both a wave and a particle, we're saying it's both the rock and the ripple. How can that be? How can it be a thing and the quality of a thing at the same time? Light has been a symbol for the Spirit and for God in many religions. The Zoroastrians conceived of the universe as a battleground between the God of light and the God of darkness. The Hindus celebrate Diwali, the festival of lights, at around this time of year. The Bible abounds in light imagery. And this is continued in Christian art, where you can tell how holy a figure is by whether he or she has a halo. But I want to concentrate this morning on Judaism and on the lights of Hanukkah. Hanukkah is not in the Bible. It comes from the Talmud, the rabbi's commentary on the Bible. The legend of Hanukkah is set at the time of the Maccabean revolt against the Seleucid ruler Antiochus IV. Judea had been ruled by an Egyptian dynasty until about 200 BCE, when the Greek Seleucid Empire defeated the Egyptians and Judea came under Seleucid rule. The first Seleucid ruler, Antiochus III, was tolerant of Jewish religion, which at that time centered around a priesthood and the temple in Jerusalem. The temple, originally built by King Solomon, had been destroyed by the Babylonians back in the 6th century BCE and was rebuilt when the exiles returned from Babylon under Ezra and Nehemiah. After that rebuilding, Nehemiah had a consecration ceremony in the temple that lasted 8 days. The importance of the temple for Jewish life cannot be overstated. It was considered the residence of God on earth. There were complex purification rituals before a priest could enter its most sacred precinct. Jewish cosmology conceived of an axis that held up the heavens and communicated with the underworld, the axis mundi, the axis of the world. The place where the axis of the world intersected the earth's surface was at the temple in Jerusalem. All of Jewish monotheism, all of the separateness of the Jews from their Palestinian neighbors was embodied in that building and the worship which went on there. That worship was based on animal sacrifice. which occurred on a great altar. By the 2nd century BCE, however, traditional Jewish practice was competing with the new cosmopolitanism. Some Jews in Jerusalem particularly had become Hellenized, speaking Greek, and even worshiping Greek gods. There was a conflict between the traditionalists and the Hellenized Jews, and at some point in this conflict, the second Seleucid ruler, Antiochus IV, invaded Jerusalem in 175 BCE, put a stop to temple sacrifices, forbade circumcisions, and sacrificed to the Greek god Zeus in the temple of Yahweh. A desecration. It was against this desecration that the traditionalist Jews revolted. A priest named Mattathias led the revolt, and when he died, he was succeeded by his sons, of whom the most notable was Judas, who was nicknamed Maccabeus, the Hammer. Judas led a successful guerrilla campaign against a much larger Greek force and eventually won back Jerusalem and the temple. He started a ceremony to rededicate the temple exactly 3 years after Antiochus IV had desecrated it. Nehemiah's dedication 3 centuries earlier had taken 8 days, and so Judas's rededication took 8 days. The word Hanukkah, incidentally, means dedication. The Talmudic legend is that the oil lamp in the temple only had enough oil for 1 day of the celebration, but somehow that oil lasted 8 days. You could conceive of it these days in terms of your cell phone. If you only charge your cell phone for 1 day, but it actually lasted 8 days, you would think it was pretty miraculous, right? So there you have it. The light of Hanukkah can be conceived as the light of Jewish faithfulness to the covenant that God had made with their ancestor Abraham, that he would make of them a great nation. When we sing, "Don't Let the Light Go Out," we can mean the continued existence of Jews as God's chosen people. But when Peter Yarrow wrote the words of this song that we sang this morning, I don't think he had in mind simply the survival of the Jews as a people. That's a part of it. And certainly the survival of the Jewish people, the descendants of Abraham, had been in question at many periods in history, starting with the slavery in Egypt, continuing through the Exodus, the settlement in Canaan, the period of the Judges, the annihilation of the northern kingdom of Israel by the Assyrians in the 8th century BCE, the sack of the southern kingdom of Judah by the Babylonians in the 6th century BCE, and the forced exile of most of the inhabitants in Babylon. At all of these periods, the light might have gone out. And the victory of Judas Maccabeus in the 2nd century did not assure that the light was safe. The dynasty Judas founded, the Hasmoneans, ruled Judea for 150 years, but they kept the Greek Empire at bay by inviting in the Romans. And the later Hasmoneans ruled under the tutelage of the Roman Empire. The last Hasmonean Jewish ruler was Herod, of 3 wise men fame, and during the lifetime of Jesus, the Romans dispensed with Jewish kings of Judea and ruled directly through Roman governors. Then 30 years after the death of Jesus, the Jews rose up in revolt against Roman rules, and the Romans ruthlessly put down that revolt, and again destroyed the temple and desecrated it by sacrificing to Jupiter before they destroyed it. At that point, it might have looked like the light had gone out. Temple Judaism, indeed, was crushed, and it never recovered. Judaism took a radically different form. Instead of priests, there were rabbis. Instead of the temple, there were synagogues. Yet it didn't go out. And yet there continued to be Jews. They continued to read the Torah. And they continued the worship of Yahweh. And in that sense, the light did not go out and has not gone out since. The Christian church, of course, would maintain that a new light was born at that time, out of the reorganization of Judaism after the defeat of the revolt in the 70s, the Common Era. A new initiative was started by the followers of a figure executed 30 years before. The stories in circulation got written down as Gospels, and the mission went out to spread the good news not only to the Jews, but to the Gentiles as well. One of the Gospel writers, a follower of Plato, conceived of Jesus as the light of the world. The light shines in the darkness, and the darkness does not overcome it. The true light that enlightens everyone was coming into the world. try to keep alive the light of Jesus' Spirit from going out. Here at the winter solstice, there's a more specific sense in which we don't want to let the light go out. The biggest light we have is the sun, but its light gets scarce around this time of year. The sun is so important to us that many humans over the ages have worshipped the sun as a god. And the winter solstice was a particularly important time to worship the sun, because it was then, when the god seemed in danger of slipping away altogether, that a little worship might persuade him to return. Thus it was in the year 274 of the Common Era, the Roman Emperor Aurelian decreed December 25th, which was the solstice on the Julian calendar, as Natalis Solis Invicti, birth of the invincible sun, a festival honoring the sun god, Mithras. In designating December 25th as the date of their nativity feasts, Rome's Christians challenged paganism directly. This is how we came to celebrate the birth of Jesus at this time. But Christian or Jewish or Hindu or pagan, people do what they can to compensate for the sun's scarcity by lighting candles and bonfires, and in modern times, decorating trees, houses, and anything else we can find with electric lights. Don't let those lights go out. When we put aside illusion and superstition and error to see things as they really are, we are said to be enlightened. The Buddha is an early example of enlightenment. He famously achieved enlightenment in one day of sitting under the Bodhi tree. In Western history, the period of the late 17th and 18th centuries is often called the Enlightenment, for that is the birth of modern science. Before the Enlightenment, everything that happened was thought due to God's will. The world worked on laws laid down by God and known to him alone. Isaac Newton challenged this view by showing that the motions of the planets actually obeyed mathematical laws, and soon educated people everywhere began to see that everything in nature ran on neutral laws which could be described mathematically. Both Unitarianism and Universalism are post-Enlightenment religions. Both start from the assumption that the world is regulated by impersonal natural forces. In the 19th century, our ancestors accommodated the geologist Charles Lyell, who showed that the age of the earth was much older than that claimed in the book of Genesis, and Charles Darwin, who showed that species evolve into one another. Thus, when I say don't let the lights go out, one of the things I have in mind is the Enlightenment and the whole enterprise known as science. Science is the attempt to explain things by theories of general application. A scientific experiment, given the same conditions, should get the same result whether it is performed in Chatham or Constantinople or Cusco. This point of view is small u universalist, and it fits in with the big U universalist notion that we are all children of one God. And to that extent, the light of the Enlightenment is the opposite of the lights of Hanukkah, for it is anti-tribal. From a universalist perspective, we can celebrate the survival of the Jewish religion and the Jewish people as a distinctive ethnicity down to the present day, but that does not mean they're entitled to special treatment before the bar of justice. The light we would keep alive is a light that shines on all peoples. It does not allow for American exceptionalism or Jewish chosenness. The Holocaust was only one of the most recent chapters of a long tragic tale of oppression of the Jewish people in the Christian West that includes the Crusades, the expulsion from Spain, the pogroms. But even in context, Hitler's final solution was an exceptional horror. He did his best to douse the light of the Jewish people, and the injury inflicted in the Holocaust was incalculable and beyond any measure of compensation. But, and I'm going to say hard words here, but I think they have to be said, that injury does not license the present state of Israel to oppress its neighbors. The light of freedom should shine as brightly for the Palestinians as it does for the descendants of Judas Maccabeus. The story of Judas Maccabeus is sometimes used these days as an argument for militaristic Zionism. That may be the light you choose. For myself, I choose the light of peace and reason and love as the ones I want to keep alive against the darkness of violence and retribution. As the song says, light one candle for the strength that we need to never become This gets us back to the present moment. If we look at the Palestinian-Israeli conflict, we can at least see reasons for the violence on both sides. Each is trying to use violence to achieve political objectives. But when we look at Newtown, it is hard to see any sense in a mass murder of children. The lights in the eyes of these innocent young people were snuffed out by a troubled soul using high-capacity firearms. I saw their pictures on the internet this morning. They look just like the kids who were here in our sanctuary last summer. Our spirits cave at the horrible loss, and we want to curl up in a ball. And because our grief sits so painfully within us, we seek to turn it into rage. But it is hard to rage against the killer, for as is often the case in these matters, he took his own life at last of all. He was the last victim. And so we rage against the gun lobby, or against the Supreme Court, or against the gridlock political system, or against our fellow citizens who own guns and are afraid of the government taking them away. We look to turn our anger into something useful. I've already signed one online petition calling for greater gun controls, even as I harbor doubts whether greater restrictions on guns will prevent future massacres like this. Our song says, light one candle for the terrible sacrifice, justice and freedom demand. But then it goes on to say, light one candle for the wisdom to know that the peacemaker's time is at hand. We will all send and receive this card this season, saying peace on earth. It is hard to believe in that light, that Christmas star, when we have brutal news that absorbs our attention, when our hearts break for children murdered, whether in a school in Connecticut or in China, or by bombs falling from the sky in Israel or Pakistan, or Palestine or Afghanistan. Not every season can be a season of peace. Many times the combatants in these old struggles have to be weary enough of war that they are ready for it. The peacemaker's time may not yet be at hand. Peace does not fall into our laps. Peace comes when women and men of goodwill are willing to sacrifice and struggle for it. Yes, struggle. Contend with our neighbors. Engage in the dialogue that teases out causes and seeks solutions. Light, as a physical thing, is both ordinary and mysterious. If we break it down into its smallest elements, it is both wave and particle, both the rock and the ripple. But on a symbolic plane, the light we celebrate, the light we keep alive, can have many meanings. I've here suggested that it can be the light of the Jewish people, their distinctive identity and faithfulness to the covenant. It can be the Christian light of an ethic of living based on love. It can be the light of reason and science in the face of ignorance and superstition. It can be the light of the hope of peace. You may choose other meanings on your own. Be faithful to whatever light you have chosen. What can we do in the face of a horrible act of slaughter directed against the most vulnerable among us? We can light candles. We can do something for people we don't know. We can love the ones we're with and reach out to the ones that we love. Jesus said, no one after lighting a lamp puts it under a bushel, but on a lampstand where it can give light. A city built on a hill cannot be hid. My friends, don't let your light go out. Let your light so shine among people that they may see your light and see what is sacred in it.